Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual discussion panel. It's National Apprenticeships Week, so this week we're talking about all things apprenticeship, but today we're particularly discussing the digital and regional skills gaps. So looking particularly at digital skills and what's happening in Leicester and Leicestershire around those aspects. My name's Dr. Allan Taylor. I'm Associate Professor of Media Production here at Montfort University, but I'm also Faculty Apprenticeship Lead for the Faculty of Computing, Engineering and Media. So this particular topic is of great interest to me. Today we'll be talking about the solutions that were found to fill regional and digital skills gaps and how further education and higher education are continually working in conjunction with business to try and cover the needs of the local economy. And to do that, we've got a wide range of perspectives on the panel today. First of all, I'd like to introduce Stuart Smith, who's Head of Skills and Employment at the LEP. Hi, Stuart.
Good morning, Alan. Thank you.
Stuart, perhaps you can say a little bit about what you do for the LEP.
Yes, you may know that the LEP's here to support economic growth across the area, and we work with a range of partners across business, education and public sector. So the LEP have a bird's eye view over the whole area, really, about the wider skills supply and demand issues, so we can support commissioning and local provision. We've got a careers hub that works with schools in the area to ensure careers advisors are well informed, and a network of employment advisors who are business representatives with the schools. And in terms of apprenticeships, because we're an apprenticeship week, we always present the range of options open to young people, but also those in work and adult apprenticeships, which we think is sometimes overlooked. So we work with the likes of the Job Centre and Back to Work initiatives to raise awareness around apprenticeships. And we're about to start on a project to increase the number of apprenticeship ambassadors. We've just had some funding for that, so watch this space for that. And we work with the DMU on a range of projects and initiatives. So, and for example, Alan, we're meeting next week, aren't we, to look at how young people and creativity. So yes, we get involved in lots of things. Thank you.
Fantastic. Next we've got Andrew Gedge, who's the Deputy Principal of the SMB College Group. Hi, Andrew.
Yeah, morning, Alan. Yes, thank you for the invitation today. SMB College Group, relatively new to the table, and we are a result of a merger, really just pre-pandemic, between the Stevenson College in Colville and the Brooksbury and Melton campus that pans North Leicestershire. So yeah, really excited around the Apprenticeship Week. We fit that lovely layer between schools and higher education and employers, and obviously apprenticeships are a core part of our business.
Excellent, and I'm sure there'll be lots to talk about, especially with the introduction of the T levels and the feed into apprenticeships there. We've also got Iain. We've also got Iain McKenzie, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Mattioli Woods. Hi, Iain.
Hi, Alan. Thank you very much for the invitation today. It's good to come along and obviously talk at these things, you know, because effectively, if you look at the cradle to grave, we're at the other end of it, where we've got, you know, the graduates coming out into the business world. So for us, it's very much about the ongoing support. You know, how do we train and retain and manage and maintain? You know, we've got regional offices right across the country, so it's not just a Leicester specific position, but we are a major city centre employer in Leicester. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you live in Leicester, it's unavoidable that you'll know Mattioli Woods, because you've such both a kind of physical presence and a spiritual one, if you will, in the city. So I think it's good to have you here. Thanks, Iain.
Thank you.
We've also got Tom Ashton, Chief Executive of LEBC. Hi, Tom.
Morning, Alan. Nice to be here this morning, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for being here.
No, thank you. It's, you know, apprenticeships is a key part of the work that LEBC does. We are an education charity based in Leicester city centre, working with young people in schools and colleges across the city and county to help them become better prepared for their working lives. And certainly over the last 4 years, we've seen a real increase in interest from young people, and our role is to help them be better aware, but also to work closely with local businesses who are looking to recruit apprentices into their workforce.
Fantastic. And lastly, but not leastly, is my colleague Tasmin Raynor, who's Head of Apprenticeships at Montfort University. Hi, Tasmin.
Hello. Hi, Alan. Apologies, technical problem with my mic. Good morning, everybody. I'm Tasmin Raynor. I'm the Director of Apprenticeships at Montfort University. I lead the Central Apprenticeship team at the university, and our team works in collaborations with faculties and professional services across the university, identifying opportunities for growth, ensuring we meet all the regulatory requirements, and then also providing an effective and efficient service to our employers that we work with and our apprentices. We're a team that's really passionate, as everyone else on the panel is, about apprenticeships, and I'm really pleased that everyone on the panel could join us today.
Great, thank you so much. I think I'll begin just by asking, I mean, personally, I've been interested in the relationship between businesses and further and higher education. And I think that the education landscape is changing all the time, which has led us to create more opportunities for engagement and enterprise with local businesses. As Stuart mentioned, we work very closely with the LEP to identify these needs. But Stuart, perhaps you could say a bit more about what the LEP has found in terms of those local and regional skills gaps from talking to your members.
Yes, certainly. I've provided a brief presentation if the colleagues are able to make that visible. I thought it'd be useful to set the scene as I was first on and we're talking about apprenticeships. That's great. Can we all see that? Yes, I'm hoping. Okay, so to look at apprenticeships from the start, let me just get the, okay. So we can see apprenticeships in Leicestershire, for example, that the overall numbers have fallen year on year in the last few years. But we can see the higher apprenticeships are starting to grow. So just the intermediate apprenticeships are level 2, advanced level 3, higher level 4 plus. 2020 was very volatile because of the pandemic and the difficulty of finding placements for people. So although 2020 looks as though it's following that downward curve, it did go right down and then shot back up. So it was quite volatile. And we can see that the higher apprenticeships are really gaining popularity in the local area. And we can look at the top subject areas. I realise that the right-hand side might not be so visible, but just to say that the business administration and law and health and public services are the two main areas that that's followed by retail, engineering, construction. But the two main areas are business administration, law, health and public services. So you might wonder, well, what kind of jobs are they? One thing I found really interesting was that actually you look at the actual description of the roles, and we can see there at least half the top 12 are managerial or professional services roles. So we've got team leader, supervisor, lead, adult care worker, operations departmental manager, accountancy, taxation, senior leader. And I've made the point there that there's more accountancy and tax apprentices than hair professionals in 2021. And I think that goes against the stereotype of what people may have thought over the years about what an apprenticeship is. We're increasingly seeing these higher level apprenticeships, as we saw on the earlier slide, and that's borne out by the evidence here. If we look at the demographics of apprenticeships, we can see that, again, adults apprenticeships are the highest category. Now, admittedly, the adult apprenticeships is 25 plus, so it's a 50-year cohort, effectively, compared to the other ones at 3 years and 4 years. But even so, the idea of apprenticeships being 16-year-olds, that's not the case. And we do a lot of work around myth busting. Apprenticeships increasingly to support in-work training. We can see also gender, that for this year, female apprenticeships was there was far more than the male apprenticeships, which previously this has been in reverse. We're not sure what's driving that trend. We could do some further research into that, but that's something that's changed this year. Again, against the stereotype of what people might think. Apprenticeships by employer size, we can see the majority of apprenticeships are with big companies. A lot of the LEP work looks at raising awareness amongst SMEs, which we can see is the dark blue. So it seems to be large companies in the main, then smaller companies. So we do feel that there's more information to be had to SMEs. Now, this is from the Financial Times. I thought this was very interesting. 2 stories they've run recently. Skill shortage demand, grow your own training approach. UK employees look to hire school leavers. So increasingly, people are starting to recruit at a younger age and effectively train their own. We can see a quote there. Grant Thornton, an accountancy and consultancy firm, was saying school leavers previously 10 to 15%. They're looking to increase that to 40%. It says here by 2020. I'm sure the story was only just before Christmas, so it's 2020 soon came along. But I thought that was quite an interesting one of how these it goes back to the earlier slides about apprenticeships in professional services. I spoke to somebody the other day who worked in audit and fraud and taxation, and they were increasingly saying that because of the specialist skills required there, that it's often it's better for them to get young people in early and train them in quite specific things. So this is also with the skills shortage around that companies are bringing that in-house a little bit more, the training. Other challenges around apprenticeships at the moment, this is from speaking to colleagues, including Alan on the call actually, the other day, which I found very interesting. Around the labour shortages, they're giving opportunities for young people to go straight into work, often logistics. We talk about the big warehouses that are coming and are paying 10 up to £15 an hour. And they're often young people going straight in, earning good money compared to what an apprenticeship has traditionally earned. So that's causing some difficulty in recruitment. Traditionally low paid apprenticeships, just childcare. We've heard stories of people going into hospitality to clear tables for, again, at £15 an hour because there's a big shortage there. So again, find it difficult to get that recruitment. And overall, there are a lot of apprenticeships at the moment, apprenticeship vacancies. A big change from previous years, and certainly a year ago, although that does mirror the job market at the moment where there is the supply of vacancies and it's trying to fill the vacancies. That applies to apprenticeships as it does the rest of the labour market from what we're hearing. I've got the two screens here, so just navigate down. So the LEP commissioned some sector profiles from Cambridge Econometrics to look at the main sectors in the area. So we're talking about growth here. We can see the top areas of growth: digital tech and comms, health and social care, aerospace and satellite. Lowest growth, textile and fashion, advanced manufacturing. Now, those two areas are benefiting from technology. It doesn't mean the areas are fading away. It means that the productivity gains are being made. So they sometimes need less people in there. Now, the important thing that I wanted to make is that actually the growth is one thing, but volume of jobs is a different thing. I realise this might be quite difficult to see, but the overall pattern is that Cambridge Econometrics predict that within the next 10 years, the actual order of sectors remains more or less the same. So although we've got this growth and we've got slight contraction, we're still looking at retail and wholesale, professional services, advanced manufacturing, health and social care. They're still going to be the same areas in 10 years. So there might be some changes within the jobs, as Alan mentioned in the introduction, especially around digital skills. But we're not talking a dramatic change in the size of sectors. We can see that aerospace and technology, for example, really important locally and an exciting area. It still remains very low volume in 10 years' time, despite those gains. So it's difficult to strike that balance between supporting the new developing areas, but also acknowledging where the volume is. Professional and financial services is often overlooked, and it's such a huge area of employment. Also from Cambridge Econometrics, they looked at the importance of level 4 qualifications, and I think this is where apprenticeships can fill the gap. They fill that gap between level 3 A levels and degree. So the training can be done at the high level apprenticeships. Aerospace and satellite technology is top there, saying the majority of people. Professional services second, 68% of people need level 4. But it's just the overall message that it's saying, again, by 2024, it's not far away, that this demand for level 4 plus skills, again, which sits between A levels and degree, and is where apprenticeships can benefit, is viewed as a key area. And it's often somewhere in the UK education system that there's seen to be a bit of a gap compared with other countries. And Germany is always quoted as one that does very well at level 4 training. So digital skills partnership, I have to mention that every presentation I do, and Alan did mention digital skills. Yes. that brings together public, private and charity sectors to coordinate digital skills programs and sharing of knowledge and practice. I've got the three main areas of work there, and apprenticeship sits right in the middle because it's looking at the skilled workforce, which is upskilling current workers. It's looking at the future workforce, and it's looking at inclusion. There's eight digital skills partnerships nationwide. Leicester's not an official one yet, but we've started work and we've got over 50, it's probably near 60 local partners together, and we're having those meetings around. We've had a round of meetings already. Now, one of the areas we've identified, and again, Alan mentioned this at the start, is how digital skills are becoming more widespread across all jobs. So we've got part of the Digital Skills Partnership. We're looking at some case studies. We've got one here. The text might be small, so I'll just read it out. It's an example of somebody who works in a distribution centre, somebody who'd got a job, first job in 5 years, they were rejoining the workforce, motivated, hardworking, able to do the core job, but had to use a device, had to record what they were doing. So it's saying here they struggled logging in, updating records, and actually unpacking things and then monitoring. They were finding they were flagged on a red list in their work context. The supervisor was continually saying you're on this red list, and it was all to do with digital skills. So increasingly, whatever the sector, construction's another one that pops up, digital skills will be seen as part of the vast majority of jobs, whether it be taking instructions, recording what you've done, filling in your timesheet, ordering materials. So that's one of the key messages we're trying to put out at the moment. Thank you. That's my final slide, Alan. So.
Great, Stuart. There are so many interesting things there that I want to pick up on. You mentioned about logistics and manufacturing. Obviously, it's very big in Leicester and Leicestershire. There's a huge history of manufacturing, especially with the background in textiles, but also the point that digital is becoming so pervasive that it's needed across all sectors. So, for example, in logistics, they might use machine learning to optimize their distribution systems, or that's just off the top of my head. And increasingly, we're finding sectors like healthcare are looking for digital solutions as well. Are there any kind of other sectors that you've noticed are kind of increasingly employing digital?
Well, logistics, which you just mentioned, that was something that was really emphasised to me last week, that they were saying that a lot of the managers in logistics are IT professionals now because they've got some of its IT support around the devices. People said that when they walk into a warehouse, it's very clean and spacious, and the robotics are there. So there's lots of robotics jobs in there. But construction is one that I mentioned because of the way that the design and looking at the design on site, following instructions and that kind of interaction there, right from the start, and moving people. You have the people in the office with the design we know about, but also the ordering of materials and the day-to-day things that certainly for the sole traders and the small partnerships, ordering materials online and having to work around those systems. So it's not just the big companies with big systems, it's the sole traders and small companies who are having to do bits and pieces in the office or do things differently, which leaves them at risk of being left behind perhaps.
You also mentioned something really interesting about inclusion, and I wanted to touch on just things like digital poverty and access to opportunities in digital and how that might be affecting the skills gap. Do you think there's a factor there?
There's a lot of talk nationwide at the moment about digital poverty. And it comes down to some of the basic things. Everybody needs to be online, and it's outside work as well. So it's booking a doctor's appointment. Sometimes it's booking the shopping. So it covers all those things, but searching the internet, buying things. So locally, the LEP have actually invested £300,000 into local digital poverty projects. I don't know if you've come across that. We've just done a press release. So we look at three areas. I won't talk too long about digital poverty, but the three areas are connectivity. So can people actually get online? Have they got the connections? Have they got the data? There's devices. So one of our projects is recycling laptops. And we're looking at getting donations from large companies, or the project is, and then feeding them back into learners. And skills, basic skills. And again, that's right down to, we're speaking to health actually as well, because it includes accessing services. But in the work context, how do you apply for a job without an email address, which a surprising number of people haven't got? How do you even find a job without searching on the internet nowadays? I
was going to say, sometimes the word digital just strikes terror into people's hearts because they think it's so far removed from what they are and what they do, when in fact it's becoming integral to the success of business and to everyday life in some respects.
It does, yes, and it often can be as simple as using a smartphone. That's, it doesn't mean coding, it doesn't mean programming. It can do, and that goes right to the top of the pyramid as we've mapped out. As the skill demands for how many people need them. Not everybody needs coding skills, but increasingly, everybody needs to be able to search the internet, book an appointment, buy something. Otherwise, there is a risk of exclusion. That's we can see the alternative arrangement if people might not want to do that, but it's just making that opportunity there so people don't miss out. And as we've seen during the pandemic, simple things like being able to use a chat group with friends and reduce isolation.
You also mentioned briefly about adult learners, perhaps, and the senior leader, which is that a level 7 apprenticeship? I think that's yes. Thanks, Tasmin. So that's like equivalent to master's or postgraduate level. Maybe you could say a little bit about how we might use apprenticeships for career changes or to upskill your existing workforce.
Yes. Actually, I've made a note and I didn't read it out on my Financial Times slide, but that's an excellent prompt, actually, because of the labour shortage. That two of the things we're hearing at the moment is that in order to the skills gap, companies are looking at two things. One is hiring at a lower bar, you might say. So they know that they can't get the skills to come in and do that immediately. So they're picking the person they think has got the right aptitude, the knowledge, skills, behaviour, or giving someone a chance where maybe they might have hit a bar before, or they're looking internally. So there might be somebody in the office who they know is a very reliable, hard-working person, has always picked up what they've been given, and they've now saying, okay, do you fancy doing this role now? Because there's a labour shortage, we're not going to get someone off the shelf, and apprenticeships might be an ideal way for somebody to change in-house. I do know of an organisation actually who used the apprenticeships to train the whole workforce. So you'd find very senior people unavailable because they were doing the apprenticeship, which is not to say that you have to leave the office to do it, but to say that big companies are using apprenticeship as their whole training scheme, because it does go up to those high levels, as you've said, of 5, 6 developing managers, very senior roles in procurement was the example that I heard.
I think the senior leadership apprenticeship is a good example because a lot of people get appointed to management roles without actually having management skills, and so it's a good way to cover a broad base of things in a structured course. I know that Iain wanted to speak to the gender insight that we had about more women than men applied for apprenticeships this year?
Yeah, no, it's the numbers were quite staggering. There was 3,260 as opposed to 2,480 males from an apprenticeship perspective. The significant one there was a 25 plus. Now, what we've seen from a pandemic perspective is there's a lot more opportunities for people to do flexible working. So the speed up of the digitization of the world in general has facilitated more women being able to come into jobs that would potentially not necessarily be on their career radar, where for whatever reason they were tied to hours or they weren't able to potentially look at those hours. So certainly from us as a business, we've there have been comments made around the fact that we're more accessible into some of those senior jobs. Consultants for us traditionally would be out on the road, so it was an area and certainly an avenue that women just wouldn't consider if they were having to do good 12-hour days when they're trying to fit everything around it. Whereas now with flexible working, able to do this sort of thing with clients, where you can condense it, we've seen a big rise in females coming into those more professional. So I'd say that would probably be one of the characteristics that's helped that spike from a perspective, and it sits in line with the roles that you've highlighted from a senior position perspective.
Well, I think it's excellent news to see that increase. I just quickly want to go to a comment we've had in the chat from Janky. which I briefly like to direct to Taz, but you can, I invite other comments from the panel. Jankie's asked, what can a business do to get more involved so that we can maximise benefits to our apprentice and business? Taz?
So I would always say, speak to your local training providers and find out exactly how they can support you. It doesn't necessarily have to be that we're promoting something that we offer. It could be giving you support with how to access the levy, if you're a small business, how you can look at retaining the talent that you've already got in your business. So we find that a lot of the time, people have been working in jobs for a significant amount of time. They've got fantastic experience, but they may not have a qualification.
Mm-hmm.
And so they like to come back and study, and it's about lifelong learning, essentially. So I would always say have a conversation with your local training provider who can signpost you to the right resources.
Fantastic. I think we'll pick up on some of those points later when we'll speak to Iain and Taz about business involvement with apprenticeships. I think that was a really great grounding, Stuart, in terms of giving us some quantitative data from which to spring forward. Before we move on, and I'm just going to direct the next discussion towards Andrew. Both of us, I think, are probably interested in how and where those skills are acquired, you know, through further education and beyond into higher education. Lots of exciting developments in further education at the moment, including T-levels and apprenticeships and how they work, as well as the level 3 and 4 apprenticeships. So I just wanted to know, what role do you think apprenticeships could play in meeting the needs of the regional skills that Stuart's outlined, and how do we fill them effectively, especially in our responsibility as educational institutions?
Yeah, no, thanks, Alan. And it's an interesting phase that we've been going through in terms of apprenticeship changes. It's been quite revolutionary, really, the move from what was frameworks into now apprenticeship standards, and the focus shift that's given us to allow us to tailor specifically apprenticeships to an employer and to an employer's sectors, really. And I think that is only now really coming to fruition, really. We've had a period of transition over the last 3-4 years as standards have been introduced and frameworks have been starting to be completed with those that were registered at prior time. But now we're certainly, as a college ourselves, we're close to 100% of our apprenticeships in learning now on standards. And that revolutionary change has allowed us to focus much more on the learning rather than the assessment aspect, which were quite rigid under frameworks. And those learning focuses allow us to tailor to an employer, really, and working very closely with an employer to identify how that apprenticeship is shaped and individualized to the employer and to the apprentice themselves. So I think it's only now really coming to the realities of many providers of how we deliver apprenticeship standards in this new and exciting way. And how we also enable employers to pass on the tacit knowledge from the employer mentors, which are really key in this whole process. So, yeah, quite significant changes, and I think that itself allows a tailoring of local and employer-led strategies to be cascaded.
And what have you found? I'm particularly interested in the 16 to 19 market and thinking, have you found, are they interested in apprenticeships? How do they find out about them? And what kind of areas are they interested in?
Yeah, so absolutely. So the 16 to 19 agenda for us as a college is typically focused on the full-time students. We will have a real focus on the curriculum intent that we're offering within our curriculum for North Leicestershire. So what are the skills shortages, and how do we tailor the full-time programs to suit those skills shortages to allow our young people either to progress to university, which still is a core part of the offer that we have, but also in turn to progress seamlessly into an apprenticeship offer. And we work both as a opportunity for employers to engage with our young people and offer them work experience, which is a core part now of our study programs. And I've always said to our young people, it's a great shop window for them And it's a great opportunity for employers to sort of try before they buy, really, in terms of an apprenticeship route for individuals to their organisation. We are also going through a bit of a revolution in the post-16 sector with the introduction of T-levels, of course. And these T-levels are much more focused around the employment aspect, really, and are led by employers in terms of its informed curriculum. And has a different assessment strategies akin to an A-level, really, attached to sort of quite deep learning in quite narrow sectors that the T-level brings to the table. And they're at various points in terms of their national rollouts for T-levels. So over the next 4 or 5 years, we will see many young people now leaving colleges with T-levels and looking to progress either into the level 4 apprenticeship opportunities that hopefully will be out there, or off into traditional university courses.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Things like T-levels, apprenticeships, they're still relatively new in terms of the ways in which they're being introduced and rolled out. And I'm pretty sure it will be a growth area, and we're improving on that all the time. Iain mentioned something about flexibility, and I think that it probably means something different to us as education providers in the challenges of blended learning, which in some respects actually lends itself quite well to the idea of apprenticeships and on the job, off the job. But I wanted to ask about the challenges that you found with blended learning, particularly in the approach to work-based learning.
Yeah, I mean, some of those challenges were highlighted by Stewart, really, around obviously the device accessibility and the digital skills, those basic digital skills that our apprentices have. We've been through quite an interesting phase in education, I think, where we have probably de-skilled our populations really around the digital agenda over the last sort of 7 or 8 years. And I think under the pandemic, the realities of that have allowed very steep learning curves and allowed us to have a real understanding of the importance of baseline digital skills for the population. So they're one of the challenges, I think, in terms of delivering. We offer a blended model for our apprenticeships. We deliver national apprenticeships to providers like Barrett's Construction, for example, and we can provide both opportunities for face-to-face learning, particularly where they're hand skills related, but also for things like maths and English for learners up and down the country. We can provide then opportunities for them to dial in and be upskilled really on their maths and English journeys that they are on. And we also offer a personal learning platform that we call Life Skills, really, which is another core part of that apprenticeship realm, where we can have learners that are engaged in blended learning opportunities to update themselves around safeguarding and prevent agendas and other important life skills that goes hand in hand with their employment. Great.
And do you think, in terms of the skills gap and digital, is there an opportunity at that age post-16 or in terms of adult education and further learning, lifelong learning, as we might say, to maybe identify at an earlier point what that potential skills gap could be going into industry by looking at the gaps in the knowledge of that population?
Yeah, no, most definitely, Alan. We have real flexibilities, I think, in terms of how we shape the curriculum, and we are very much back to the days where we used to deliver IT as a key skill on many of our student programs. And I think we are not necessarily worried about the qualification outcomes from that, but certainly about the learning opportunities around good discipline, around those baseline digital skills that very much will act as a platform really for their next steps as they progress into sector-specific skills needs that they might have. I was smiling when Stuart was talking about construction and IT skills earlier. I just had a colleague come to me with quite a sizable request for drones for the construction sector and some staff training that they require to use those drones. And I think that's just a reality of how we as an organisation upskill our staff, but also how we need to keep ahead of how that industry is changing quite seismically.
Great, thanks so much. I'm going to bridge that gap between education and business by turning to Iain now. So Iain, obviously you are the CEO of a large business presence in Leicester. I just wanted to ask, from your perspective, what are emerging trends you're seeing in terms of learning and development provision for employees? Maybe there's skills gaps that you see even from graduates coming into the workplace.
Yeah, I'm not the CEO. I'm the COO.
Oh.
So yeah,
Sorry.
you promoted me. That's the fastest promotion, and
I'm going to send my research.
Thank you. That was good. No, I mean, certainly from us, I think you said the word earlier on, spiritual. You know, in Leicester, we're a responsible employer. We've built a big building in what was quite a rundown part of the city centre, and we've brought a whole load of new business into the area, with coffee shops and so on and so forth popping up around us. So when the pandemic hit, it was very noticeable. And from a spiritual perspective, people also sort of liken us to the rugby's. They'll sort of say, "Oh, you're the guys in the back of the Tiger shirts," and it's just that sort of connection. So we do manage to get into a lot of different areas. But when you think of Mattioli Woods, a lot of people don't really understand what we do because they see a building with wealth management on it, and they just assume, well, are you a bank or are you a building site? You know, what is Mattioli Woods? As an organisation, coming into it, as well as the financial side, we deal with pensions, wealth management, employee benefits, etc. So there's all the consultants and the client relationship managers, and the support that goes into supporting the people that are actually going out and speaking to the clients. We've also got an IT team that sit and support the business. You know, we've got 823 employees across 25 or so different locations around the country. I was over in Belfast, for example, yesterday. So there's, you know, the breadth and depth of the business is massive. And we've got an investment team, we've got an operation team that deal with all the day-to-day logistics. We've got human resources, we've got marketing, we've got a business assurance team, we've got a risk team, we've got a compliance team, we've got a finance team that do the number crunching. So from a business perspective, we don't just do finance. So there's lots and lots of areas for people to come into it. So I guess from a business perspective, there's the areas for people to move internally. I think it was Stewart that was mentioning about, you know, the change in people's and business. So someone can come into the business and work in support, and they'll move into client relationship. They might then decide, well, actually, I want to work in operations or change management. So they can switch across and move across the business. So from an addressing the skills gap perspective, back to your question, there's a huge amount of work that we've had to do, you know, as a business. As a pandemic came in, we had to mobilise the best part of, at the time, 700 staff to a remote working perspective. And you are asking people that are digitally nervous or scared or whatever to suddenly go home and start dialing into Teams calls and sending documents and dealing with clients in a different way. So it's not only for us as a business perspective, we've also got the other side where the majority of our clients, or not the majority, a large part of the clients are going to be in the 60 plus because it's pensions, it's wealth management. So you've suddenly got that void of having to teach people how to do things. One of our senior consultants said one of his clients was quite annoyed because he rang him on the phone rather than FaceTimed him on his phone to have a client meeting. So, you know, there's that catch up. You know, the pandemic has supersized with steroids people's opportunity to take on technology. Even, you know, just listening to Andrew sort of saying about the use of drones and so on and so forth. It actually, technology acts as an enabler if it's used properly. So, you know, you can use it to better society, etc. If you're looking at the sort of the skills gaps that we've had to address, you know, key things like cybersecurity, basic education on phishing emails and spam emails, you know, because there's that interaction not only internally but there's external, and where graduates and apprenticeships and so on and so forth coming through and into the business, they tend to have the finger on the pulse a lot more than some of us older people do. So, you know, they can bring in fresh ideas, new ways of looking at things, and actually key into some of the areas that we might be a little bit more exposed in. I think it was Tasmin said the word, you know, retaining talent, and Stuart said about grow your own. You know, we very much go on the basis of organic development with ourselves internally. You know, the business is 30 year old. We just celebrated our 30-year anniversary. And one of the ladies that retired just earlier on, she'd been with the business for 28 years. Some of our senior consultants have been with the business for the best part of 18, 19 years. So there's a lot of avenues, but people are in it for the long term. So we do have to look at that organic development internally. We run training courses, and we take CRMs and consultants and put them on the journey into being consultants and training them. We've also got all the regulatory pressures that come along from the FCA. So they will come along and they'll sort of say, well, you need to address, that there's a big push on client dealing, there's a big push on what we do. So we're constantly having to evolve and change the way that we do stuff. From an agility perspective, obviously mobilizing so many staff and getting them to work from home, we've had to do a lot of the training remotely. And set up, forums like this. We wouldn't have dreamt of having this, 3 years ago. This would have been a panelled event where we're all sat around a table and chatting, and it might have been done on an old video recorder or whatever, and then posted on YouTube in about 2 weeks' time, or But what we're doing is we're doing a live stream just now that will be available, almost instantaneously with the team behind it, and that really leads into the actual developing that digital resilience. We all have to be digitally aware, whether it's personal, I think Stuart said about the personal use, or it's from a business perspective. So, as a business, we've had to really grow and adapt. I'm actually getting some bad feedback. Is it just me?
Yeah, no, I was trying to mess with microphone settings to see, but I can hear a slight bit of feedback.
So apologies, I don't know where the feedback was coming from. So
technology.
No, but this is the reality of it. I was saying earlier on, I crashed on the last webinar and had to do it all blindly with people messaging. But it is, just from, just the nuts and the bolts of it, the digital shift to digital has created that massive skills gap where you are asking people in their, their late 50s to completely change the way that they work. And, we as a business have had to evolve and do that. One of the things that we are actually talking to the Montfort University about is actually upskilling our clients, not our internal folk, but our clients to better understand the use of technology and recognize, phishing emails and scam bits, because, we deal with their money. So we need to be able to make sure that we deal with it sensibly and not expose them to risks where they're getting asked to do transactions and stuff. So in an absolute nutshell, that's where we're up to. It's a big area with lots of opportunities.
You've mentioned so many interesting points because I'm actually originally from Northamptonshire, but I moved to London. I came back to work at De Montfort in August 2020, and I live just opposite Mattioli Woods at the end of New Walk. So, the effects of the pandemic was resounding. But in terms of improvement from leaving, when I was 18 to coming back as an adult, and what that redevelopment, it used to be the old council building, is done in terms of regeneration for the area is massive. Going back to digital resilience, I think you mentioned a few sectors there that maybe, I guess, 10 or 15 years ago, people might not have thought so much about, like cybersecurity, for example, and it's more kind of pressing needs nowadays, and things like GDPR and privacy. How have you managed to stay agile and responsive to those changes?
Ironically, and if we step back to 2018, October 2018, we actually ran a disaster recovery exercise based on Brexit. So we've got this massive glass building in the city centre that's, a walkway up to Victoria Park from Town Hall Square. So, in our mind, at the time we had 400 odd members of staff in the building. If we have to mobilise and get 400 members of staff out because there's a riot as a result of Brexit and people can't come into the office, what do we need to put in place? So we started addressing that in October, and we rolled out some training to staff. We changed the way that we interacted internally. A lot of our stuff went from servers onto the cloud. We're completely cloud-based now. But that then came with it, the opportunity to tighten up your cybersecurity to get a lot of the things in place. So when the pandemic looked like it was hitting, we'd mobilized a number of offices to working remotely by February the 23rd, I think it was, before the country went into lockdown. So for us, it was embracing that that change and sort of saying, I used the word enabler. We need to enable the clients to interact directly with our consultants. So making sure all the phone lines were digital and we didn't rely on people having to be in the office. But as we said, going back to the original question, that comes with it, all the training and everything that we had to do to upskill those people from a digital poverty perspective and digital knowledge and perspective. But also you mentioned London. We've got the flip side where, if we're looking at retaining talent, as Tasmin said earlier on, we train staff and then we're in competition with London from a wages perspective. So, actually, you can work from home from flexible working perspective. You only need to come into the office once a month, and we'll pay you more money and make it easier for you to work in London and not have the London sitting wage. So for us as an employer, we're constantly battling around that perspective. So there's a real fight on our hands to try and retain that talent in the city and just be that responsible employer in the city centre.
If anybody's watching from outside of Leicester, I have to say that the cost of living goes down. So there's a counterbalance there in terms of the benefits of working. The last thing I was going to mention to you is about the financial sector in general and trends analysis and using things like data analysis and maybe even in future some form of machine learning to analyze trends. Do you think that will be important, on the horizon?
Yeah, definitely. From a machine learning perspective, we've had to completely review the way that we do stuff. So things that were massively manual processes, so annual valuation summaries, stuff where people have to pull a lot of the things together. Using that machine learning and using that opportunity to exploit that from a data analytics perspective is really it's key to us moving forward, because again, it just facilitates the people being able to do the jobs that they're that they're here to do from a consultancy perspective, rather than get bogged down in the nitty-gritty. So machine learning is on the horizon for financial services. So yeah.
Fantastic. I'm just going to address a comment that we've had before we move on from Hishan. He said, do you think there is scope for a collaborative approach for key stakeholders to co-market the local apprenticeship offer aimed at employers? I recall something in the past via a generic brochure. I think that a lot of us here can speak to this question, but from my own personal perspective, I would say yes, absolutely. We're already in the process of trying to forge links between T-levels and Montfort University as an example of that feed-in from further education to higher education. But I think that all of us here are kind of working closely on many different levels in order to facilitate that collaborative approach. I'll direct you to a couple of people because I know you all have different perspective on this. So Andrew, for example, how do you see that collaborative approach and that maybe that journey of a learner from you through to the workplace?
Yeah, I think it's really important that providers do work in a cohesive approach, Alan, really to support specialisms. Certainly from our perspective, we're very focused around making sure that we maintain in our key areas industry standard equipment, for example, and of course that comes with huge costs. So to be able to specialise in certain areas and recognise that others would be stepping in to support other specialisms is probably the model I would suggest, and is a European model, as you alluded to earlier, really, that we need to be moving into for this work. We certainly have identified specialisms for each of our campus, and that's the way we're going to move forward, really, to try and not be all things to all people at each of our campuses and signpost other providers in that cooperative fashion moving forwards.
Fantastic. Taz, I think you have something to say maybe about how we're already working together collaboratively.
Yeah, I was just going to say what we're keen to do as a university is explore progression routes. So right from level 2 all the way through to level 7, and working in collaboration and partnerships with local training providers and national training providers to offer what employers need, so that someone can essentially have that lifelong learning that we keep referring to from the beginning all the way through. And then the other thing that we're looking closely at is internally cross collaboration between our faculties. Yes. So we might bring 2 different areas together. So digital health is one of those areas that we might look at. And in terms of senior leader, maybe having things that are sector specific. So you might have senior leader in the health sector, and you'd have the health faculty contributing to the curriculum and the business faculty delivering the core modules. So I definitely think collaboration is absolutely necessary internally and externally.
Yeah, and again, going back to that kind of pervasiveness of digital, the Leicestershire Innovation Awards are coming up shortly, and one of the nominees, Brainberry, are using gamification for dementia. So it's that balance between, two different things that you didn't necessarily would fit together. But also we've got some amazing research projects here at Montfort University that encompass AI and mental health, creative technologies, and their impact on healthcare. And I think sometimes the business community might be a bit more hand to mouth in terms of the skills it feels it needs now. There is a piece maybe about looking at how that's developing and what will need to be in place in 5 to 10 years. But that's perhaps a discussion that we can return to. Stuart, I don't know if you lastly want to say something maybe about how the LEP is facilitating those conversations between providers and industry.
I think the statement is something that we're constantly trying to do to create that area offer, because, as I said in the introduction, that because the LEP is impartial and sits across the region, we are in a position to promote everyone, and we try to do that. We have provider meetings to bring the providers together on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. We've just created an apprenticeship strategy, which is looking at some of these things. I think the question mentioned a brochure. We do those kind of brochures. Maybe we need to focus more on apprenticeships as the single issue. We do find for businesses overall, and this is in digital as well, there are a lot of offers around at the moment of what businesses can do, and it's trying to create a coherent offer, because otherwise businesses can easily be confused, understandably, because there's so many initiatives up and coming at the moment. But we'll always welcome feedback of how best to do this, because we do have that convening power to bring together the providers, training providers, colleges that we do meet regularly with, and say how is the best way to do this. And we work with the districts, who then have the business network. So we've got the networks set up to communicate these things, and we've got the provider networks to talk about these things. So the issue is the best way of doing this. Any suggestions? Welcome. But I say we have tried various avenues, whether it be brochures or events.
Yeah, I find, I've been really surprised by the amount of help pleasantly surprised in Leicestershire, and the amount of people that are willing to help. And to bring it up again, like the Leicester Innovation Awards, I was surprised to see the level of business innovation that's happening within the county and within East Midlands in general. So I think I think maybe as an SME, or if you've got a small business, you might feel like you're isolated in that you have these training problems or skills gaps, or there's something you need. There is information and advice out there, and I would just urge people to reach out to. Again, in Leicestershire, I've found if you're willing to reach out to someone, they're happy to have a conversation with you and point you in the right direction. Which is probably a very neat segue onto our next panel member, Tom Ashton, Chief Executive of LEBC. Because I wanted to ask you about the types of programs that are already on offer, and we could even extend that into other business initiatives that are happening in the region that are meeting the needs of skills gaps in organisations. Do you think there's anything missing at the moment? And following on from what we've just said, are there any conversations that we need to facilitate in order to make these happen?
Thanks, Alan. Yes, I think that there's been a really positive change in the apprenticeship landscape over the last 5 years, with the introduction of standards, offering a structured, employer-driven framework to help build skills within workforces. And, as a result of that, there are wider qualifications available, meaning that, industries who, traditionally may not have considered apprenticeships as a training and development route way for themselves. We're seeing that landscape change. I think that along with that is the changing the mindset of school and college leavers towards apprenticeships, particularly now that there's been a real drive on higher and degree level opportunities. And, through the work that LEBC does with local schools and colleges, providing careers guidance, we are starting to see, demand for particularly degree apprenticeships outstripping kind of availability at the moment. And that links back to that, collaborative message, particularly to SMEs, obviously looking at the, the data that Stewart shared regarding the majority of apprenticeships really being, driven by larger employers. So, that's kind of the work that LEBC has been involved in, and the LEP and all the key providers and partners are having discussions. There are networks in place to really drive this message. And I think that we're quite fortunate in Leicester and Leicestershire regarding some of those structures, that partners are talking to each other to really approach this in a strategic way. And Stuart mentioned about the LEP's apprenticeship strategy, and it's having those clear objectives, understanding our local needs, to identify really what the best way forward is, and just thinking about the current challenges in the landscape. I think that businesses in the aftermath of COVID and identifying the new skills needed in the business obviously is going to take a bit of time to really understand what that new world looks like. But I think also linked back to recruitment challenges in the landscape, not just in terms of recruiting apprentices, new into the business, but just generally across the landscape, recruitment challenges means that having to balance, the idea of upskilling existing staff who will have, a portion of their time out of work, and balancing the kind of the workload management for them, because that needs to be a positive experience, a positive learning experience for the apprentice, which I want to expand on a little bit later on. But I also think that in terms of that future talent attraction, and extending to Tasmin's comments around retention, there's challenges there for employers in terms of replacing jobs demands, but also growing businesses and recruiting enough labor resource to meet growth as well as replacement job demand, skill sets, unfortunately, that we're going to be losing in the next 10 years because of retirement, for example, with an aging workforce. So I think that it's really interesting to be involved in this. And speaking from our own experience, so we have 3 degree apprentices who are coming to the end of their Chartered Business Management apprenticeship, that we have been going through that process with DMU, who are our chosen training provider. And from a small to medium sized business's perspective, that structure and that framework has been really, really integral to our ability as an organisation to support the development of somebody in their early career. And I think that, across other areas of the business where we have also, been involved in apprenticeships with existing staff, again, the structure that provides a business to support the skills development, is integral. And that's something that, we obviously advocate, talking about our own experience.
Great. So you talked a little bit there about a kind of obsolescence approaching of people who will retire and skills we might lose. Is there anything that you've identified there, as well as the skills that are coming in, the jobs that are being created by these new developments?
Well, I think that, I suppose, just linked to the replacement of capacity via new entrants into the workforce. One of the the current challenges that I think businesses are seeing is around work readiness. And this links nicely to what Andrew was talking about regarding the introduction of T levels, but also thinking about the way that the pandemic has really made it challenging for schools and colleges to fully prepare young people for the workplace due to traditional careers activities such as work experience not being possible in the normal way. And I think we are seeing a slight knock-on effect in terms of the more holistic skills that businesses are looking for. So that this is not just about industry specific skills, but actually the ability to communicate with people that you don't know, that resilience and that confidence that all businesses are really looking for when they recruit somebody into an early career position. There's a real challenge there, and that is disrupting the landscape a little bit in terms of businesses' ability to recruit into positions, and actually the requirement for maybe some additional support and a realignment of expectations from organisations when they're recruiting early career individuals into their business. And so I think that that conversation needs to continue. There needs to be kind of an understanding and clarity that actually the expectation that businesses may have had regarding a school or college leaver coming into the workforce in the next couple of years needs to be interpreted and maybe reanalyzed, to recognise some of those challenges that we've seen, and that's really important. But and Iain might be able to share his experience on that from a business. We too are going through that as an organisation, looking to keep offering apprenticeship opportunities to school and college leavers, but also just through our work with young people. Things are looking obviously more positive, which is really important. Lots of careers activities that haven't gone ahead are starting to be planned for 2022, like work experience, face to face, and that's going to really help this discussion and the landscape over the next couple of years.
Just on that, I was just going to say, just on that, leading on. Certainly, when the pandemic hit, obviously, our people team, HR team, they were very heavily involved, and we had a graduate program in place. And suddenly it was, well, how do we train? How do we work with? So it is about getting those face-to-faces, getting people together, bringing people back together, so that you can almost see the whites of their eyes. Because as good a forum as this technology allows, there's nothing like actually reading somebody's body language and being able to sort of have a conversation in passing more with someone rather than a formal face-to-face. So for us, the teams have just started going back out again, and we're doing some work with DMU around that. One of the areas that I've seen the most questions about, certainly as we ran into the LBC Graduate Train Retain webinar, was businesses actually saying, well, how do I engage with universities? How do I engage with people coming in? So it's almost that sort of, if you take the hourglass and you flip it back upside down again, what support do we need to give to businesses to get them to come back in and show them what they need to do? So it is a finely balanced point which does need working through, but it's a very valid point. So
it's amazing to me, because I think that we're very keen to reach out all the time, and I know Taz will agree with me, and like all of our enterprise team know how important business engagement will be in the future. And I think we're at a point of flux really with higher education between old ways of working and new ways of working. And it's interesting how the apprenticeship model, in terms of the 80% on the job, 20% off the job, I have got that right, model, it could actually re-inform our higher education practice and how we form more traditional undergraduate courses, and even how we work with business to provide further training opportunities in terms of a structure that works for them, because block or day release is much more palatable than sending someone away for a year-long course or a 6-week-long course or however long. So I think we're the sector is in flux at the moment, and I'm sure Andrew would agree to some extent. And it's really positive that these new T-levels and these new ways of working are coming in. On that point, I think I'll move to Tasmin, who'll be able to tell us how we're adapting to that changing higher education and business landscape. So Taz, what do you see as the future of apprenticeships for the region, given all of these changes?
I often say to people, I haven't got a crystal ball. I wish I did. But I do see apprenticeships as being a pivotal part of economic recovery. So Leicester as a city had the longest period of continuous lockdown, which obviously has had significant consequences for the local economy. Businesses have had to adapt to the changing circumstances and behaviours of people. Providers have had to adapt because we've had to move more to blended teaching and learning. And I think the trends that were predicted to unfold in future years happened very quickly, almost overnight in some examples. And we saw this mass move to remote working, home learning, online shopping. So it's still unclear as to what extent the economy is going to return to the pre-pandemic normal, which there are changes that are now so embedded that they almost become permanent transformations in terms of how we live, how we learn, how we work. And I think the current skills shortages frequently include, as the panel have discussed, a lack of digital literacy and technical skills, and also basic skills like how to interact with clients. So people need skills around, transferable skills around, taking a phone call, for example. I'm certainly always saying to my children that they need to be able to interact with people, not just via social media or text, etc. So it's simple things like that. I think the technology sector is growing 2.6 times faster than the rest of the economy. And so that's creating a wide range of roles that didn't exist even 10 years ago. So with any sector growth, you've obviously got an increase in employment opportunities. However, because of the fast changing nature of the tech industry, when it's not always that straightforward, I think the emerging technologies amplify the need for the digital skills in the current job market. But I think recruitment tends to be a common challenge for employers who may struggle to find those skilled individuals. And that's where work integrated apprenticeships provide that model to fill the gap, enabling people to study as well and earn a salary, because not everybody can afford to go to college or university with all the accommodation that might include and costs of travel and things like that. So I think apprenticeships provide a means for employers and professional bodies to work with the education sector to deliver those higher level skills and ultimately create the employees with the skills that the industry needs. And it is a case of being able to grow your way, because there are also things where businesses might want somebody to also learn about their company and the way that they do things, as opposed to just, learning a skill. So there's a benefit in that as well. And then they're also a tool for, driving the environmental agenda, and they feed into the levelling up agenda and seek to enhance social mobility and opportunities for all. So as you can see, I'm really passionate about, apprenticeships addressing all these skills gaps.
Absolutely. So I'm talking to a business the other week. I found exactly what you're describing, that graduates come into the workforce and they find that there's a kind of a gap, so that they have the skills required to enter, but perhaps not the niche skills, and they need some level of retraining. I'm just thinking about the future, maybe both of apprenticeships and higher education in the way they're formatted, about hop on, hop off, or shorter intensive periods, and whether that will become something that universities provide.
So yeah, we're certainly looking at that. The progression routes that I spoke about earlier, from level 2 to level 7, we're also looking at progression routes at university, depending on the stage that somebody's at in their career. So they may not want to undertake a degree straight away, for example. They may want to do a level 4 program or a level 5 program, step off, get some experience, and then come back and do their degree, and indeed later on then top up and do a master's qualification. So we're also looking at those kind of progression routes.
Excellent. So if I'm a business, how do I get involved with apprenticeships, and how does it work for me in terms of things like claiming the levy?
So what I would say is, like I said before, get in touch with your local providers. Certainly from our perspective at DMU, we have an apprenticeships email address, which is apprenticeships@dmu.ac.uk. If anybody drops us a line, whether that be a prospective candidate who wants to undertake an apprenticeship or an employer who's got questions, we're more than happy to help.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Just a brief note to anybody that's watching, you can post your comments and questions. I'm about to open this up to the whole panel, and I have a bit of a bomb to drop in terms of asking you all a question. What do you think that the levelling up agenda will mean for Leicester and Leicestershire? I think I'll direct that first to Stuart, and then we can open it up more generally. Lucky
Thanks,
you.
Alan. I was just about to start making some notes when you turned to me, and you've gone to me straight away. I think, yes, I think levelling up. So there's been endless things written about it over the weekend, but I think one of the best things was someone said levelling up is simply addressing inequality. That's the whole point of levelling up. That's what it means in simple terms. At the LEP, we've got inclusion as a pillar of work that we'd like to address anyway. I think social mobility was just mentioned by Tasmin. So those things are on the agenda already. People are more conscious of it. Businesses constantly talk about their desire to help the community and that corporate social responsibility. So in terms of the nitty gritty of things, whether it will be huge policy changes, there could be some locally to look at the politics of it. I know Leicestershire's been invited for a county deal, so levelling up in that sense. But in other senses, it's many of the things that we're already trying to do. We looked at the missions. I think there's 12 missions is there in the levelling up, and again they map to addressing inequality, which we've mentioned before. So yes, good intentions, but hopefully things that are on our radar and things we're working towards already.
Great. Iain, as Mattioli Woods has several different branches across the country, what do you think levelling up the levelling up agenda will mean for you?
I think as we use the word CSR and various bits like that. What the levelling up does is it facilitates businesses to revisit how they operate, how they work. It creates more opportunities than in unopportunities, if you like. So there's the scope around the infrastructure. There's a scope around faster internet. There's all of these things that we said earlier on about digital poverty. Things like the levelling up goes a long way to actually bridging some of those gaps. Which if you think about where we need to get to as a country, there's the set in stone things about 2030. If you even look at the transport systems and the opportunities for levelling up to redefine how we move, interact, evolve, if you like. The human race is a society that has evolved over millions of years to where we are today, and it's things like this that allow us to just keep doing that and redefining and rethinking about what we do. So I see good bits. I also see some bad bits with it. There's some frustrations in agendas, where you're looking at increasing various bits. I can't turn this into a political thing, but for us, it's there is bits where we have to tread with caution. But on the whole, it's a good leveler, which is what it's designed as.
Tom, what do you think it will mean for Leicester in particular?
I think that fundamentally it will allow Leicester, in particularly parts of the city that maybe do have higher levels of disadvantage, to really make that positive journey upwards in terms of socioeconomic situations, and that fundamentally that will be of benefit to the entire community, whether that's improved attainment in education, whether that's improved experiences and therefore levels of work readiness, And I think also in terms of businesses taking some ownership in a way of working together with schools and colleges and apprenticeship training providers, so that we are as one driving forward the landscape and fundamentally helping Leicester to continue to be a positive place. Continue to demonstrate innovation and use of technology across different sectors. And certainly from LEBC's perspective, really give young people amazing opportunities to prepare themselves for and transition into their working lives.
Great. Andrew, I wanted to ask, how do you think that as education providers that we can improve the feedback loop between us and industry, and Taz as well? You might have some thoughts on this too. So how do you think that we can be more agile in sometimes what's a very constrictive system of education?
Shall I go first?
We've moved more recently, Alan, to having... Yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, no, Andrew, go ahead. I think there's a slight delay, and that's what the problem is. But if you carry on.
Yeah. No, I was just going to share, really, we've moved more recently to establishing employer boards across all of our curriculum areas. And that has really helped inform both the traditional provision that we've got, but also the apprenticeship offer that we have, by just having that direct but regular communications with different employers over a period of time. So that really has helped shape the intent of our curriculum, which we're very focused on to make sure it's fit for purpose.
Great. Taz?
So it's the same for us. Holding employer advisory boards more and more has been very useful. But I have to say that actually the apprentices themselves are also informing curriculum and how we teach, because we do have apprentices who might come in and you might demonstrate a certain method of doing something, and they say, well, I'm sorry, but I did that yesterday and it didn't work that way, which then comes and back into the university and informs what we do as well. So that's also very useful.
Just on that, Tasmin, what we've seen, and I think I said it when I was chatting earlier on about that, the graduates coming in and offering that new way to look at stuff. What we have seen, and one of the areas that we're addressing is, it's all very well and good coming in with all the the skills on paper, but is that individual employable, and are they retainable? And it's about giving them the skills to actually sit down and be able to hold a client meeting, be able to talk to someone. I think you were saying about your kids, having that, being forced to do that almost social interaction. One of the ways that we're sort of bridging some other bits, and I picked it up with Peter Cross from DMU, was looking at doing some high-level mentoring. So aside from the apprenticeship program, actually inviting a couple of students to come in, just come in and sit down and spend an hour with me once a month to look at, what does it take to actually sit in a business. This technology has forced us to all sit at home, and if you think about the students, they've been potentially in their student dorms and on the laptop and the laps. Well, that's not how coming into an environment. You actually have to put on some trousers. You can't just come in joggers to the business. So this, I guess what I'm saying is, some of those actual life skills have been lost through this last couple of years, which if we then unwind that and take it back, then it's that employability bit to make sure that that's going to be the success to the any apprenticeship graduate program moving forward.
Yeah.
I was just checking if I'm wearing trousers, and I am, because I am in the office, but yeah.
Every one of you look down as I said there.
Sorry, Taz, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say some of the other programs that we're looking at developing as well is programs around project management and coaching, because I think we need a slightly different leadership style, which is more coaching driven, especially when it comes to people working remotely or hybrid working and things like that. So we're also looking at, what businesses might need in those areas as well.
Yeah, I think especially with Gen Z and then afterwards Gen Alpha entering the workplace, they definitely are looking at different management styles, or different management styles needed in order to work with them more effectively. the last thing I wanted to ask, because we've all talked about it in some respects, is graduate retention and the workforce in Leicester. How do we keep the talent within Leicestershire and the East Midlands? I don't know, Stuart, if you want to start again, sorry.
It's not especially an area of expertise for me. I know there's various work going on, isn't there, about the graduate city, which you're probably aware of, about retaining talent in the area. I don't know if the modern working that Iain mentioned earlier might help this, where people don't have to necessarily move out. They can access those higher wages, and because Leicester's on the edge of the commuter belt, I know it always has been in the south of the county, but perhaps that extends if it's once a week. But ultimately, the great opportunities in life sciences that we've got on our doorstep, the space sector, there's some really, really exciting high-tech sectors, really high skill demands. How we translate that to the students on the spot. I know that the universities work very close with these projects already.
Yep.
But it is the $1 million question, because the East Midlands overall statistically does see low graduate retention. Yes.
Iain, you recently chaired a panel on this subject, so I wonder if you have any insights.
I think it's one of those things. I personally, I'll say 46 years of age. I've been in Leicester for 24 years. So technically I've been in Leicester longer. I'm actually an ex-graduate from Montfort. And I've worked in a whole raft of things, which takes me to my position with Mattioli Woods. And Leicester's always been a very good central city, and it doesn't celebrate its own success enough, I don't think. So there's a bit of a self-image of the city. Tasmin mentioned, we did go through the longest stint of pandemic, and we had the whole boohoo, all of the stuff that's sort of fallen off the back of it. So it can get stuck very easily with a tarnish, and it sticks for a little while. But certainly from an employment perspective, what we try and do is give our employees the reason to want to stay employed by us. So making sure that we've got all the appropriate wage structures, the appropriate process internally for them to go through whatever training. Can we identify a route map to bring people through? There's obviously internal leadership programs. Tasmin, again, sorry to mention coaching. That for me is one of the key things. It's you can come out with something, but unless you can actually do all the soft skills and things that go with it, then providing all of that sort of stuff, providing a good place to work in a nice, clean environment, and not taking your employees and your graduates, etc., for granted is key. Because as I said earlier on, we do have that battle whereby we can train someone, we'll put them on various training courses to get them to a point where they're a fully fledged whatever, and then you're competing with a firm in London that wants to just cherry pick the best that we've got. So it's keying them in and giving them that opportunity to fly internally and have those route maps internally, and facilitating, giving the businesses the skills to pick those bits up.
Taz, do you think that apprenticeships are bridging that gap, that it could help graduate retention?
Yeah, I definitely do. When I spoke about the opportunities to step on and step off, certainly, you'd like to think that someone has a really positive experience both with their employer and with their provider. And when they take that next step in their career, they therefore are going to return and hopefully stay in the local area. But I think what we need to do as a city is actions speak louder than words. And we need to start shouting about the good work that is going on and really promoting, with case studies and things like that as much as possible.
I mean, even some of the work that's going on, around the sort of the train station and, Pilot House just down the road for us in the city, it's things we don't sing our own city's praises enough. And, it's where I see myself as having a responsibility to do that internally. There's obviously the bits coming out from the universities to really shout about the bits and the more local networks that can be forged and linked. We've got very strong links with all three universities now. So it's all about trying to get that in to retain that.
Yeah. And I think careers advice, is really important, and talking about the fact that vocational training can be just as brilliant as a more academic route, and that it's not for other people's children, because there is still that slight perception that apprenticeships are for lower levels or people who don't want to go through academia. And it's leveling up that, actually, that perception. But that starts with careers advice right from school level. And I've certainly seen employers going into schools and providing some of that careers advice and talking about their progression routes, which I think is fantastic.
Tasmin,
sorry, Iain, I just wanted to jump in there and just, kind of echo Tasmin's comments. We, through our careers guidance in local schools and colleges, and Andrew will probably, see the same through the guidance that happens, at SMB College Group. But, we are seeing an increased awareness of apprenticeships now from, younger age groups. So schools are having, apprenticeship presentations to Year 9 students. That wasn't happening 5 years ago. And we're having more parents at parents' evenings come over to us and say, can you tell me a bit more about these degree apprenticeships? So I think that we're in a shift change. And I think that it's really important that, we continue on that positive path and presenting the information, to help students have clarity around the process of securing a higher or degree apprenticeship. And I think we talked a bit earlier about, what else needs to be done, and, collaboration with employers. And I think providing clear access to opportunities is probably something that, certainly, we will focus on in our role in this landscape. But I think, overarching, multiple providers, it's about how do we get the clear information to young people to help them make those informed decisions.
Andrew, you have the pleasure of final remarks.
Well, I think it just fits in with what colleagues have said, really, around that nurturing talent, really, in an organisation. And certainly from our perspective, it's a service to the businesses to enable the construction level 2 apprentice become ultimately the quantity surveyor over a 6, 7, 8 year journey within their organisation. And I think that's our responsibility we take very seriously ourselves, in how we shape our curriculum to help that, and how a company can use that as leverage to retain talent.
Fantastic. I mean, I've always thought that it's our job in higher education to create critically informed practitioners. I know that sounds grand, but it's how do we give people the skills to succeed in the workplace, but also be reflexive on their own practice as employees, as in their own practice of what they do in the workplace as well. And I think that's where that kind of traditional academic and the apprenticeship can really meld and do something excellent. That's great. I've really enjoyed all of these conversations, and there has been so many insights today, and I'm sure everybody who's watching will reflect on those. It just remains for me to thank the panel for their insights. There's plenty to discuss on an ongoing basis. And if you're watching and thinking that you want to know more about apprenticeships, Tasmin mentioned there is an email address for DMU, which is apprenticeships@dmu.ac.uk. But there's also a link in the chat that you can see that side, I think, which looks a bit long, but it's dmu.ac.uk/business/higher-degree-apprenticeships. You can see it there, so copy and paste that into your browser now if you want to follow on. But thank you to the panel. Thank you to DMU Events who have hosted this, and thank you for watching. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks,
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.